Welcome to the tutorial for the Lacy V-Stitch Ripple Afghan. And what I'm going to do is make a small sample of this so that you can see the various stitches and how to get started and how to finish off. And I'm just making a short one, so there's only 39 chains in my example. I'll put the link for the full pattern in the notes for the video. Alright, so I'm starting with my chain of 39, and the first thing I'm going to do is make a V-stitch in the 5th chain from the hook. V-stitch just being a double crochet, a chain, and another double crochet. Then I'm going to skip 2 chains and do another V-stitch in this next chain. Then I'm going to again skip 2 chains, and then I'm going to do a shell. And a shell for this pattern is double crochet, chain, double crochet. If I can get it in there, double crochet. Well, chain, double crochet, chain, and then double crochet. So I have 4 double crochets separated by a single chain between each one, and that is a shell. Then I'm going to skip 2 chains and do a V-stitch. Skip 2 more chains and do a V-stitch. Now I'm going to skip 4 chains and do a V-stitch, and this is going to set us up for the valley portion of the ripple. I'm going to skip 4 more chains, do a V-stitch, skip 2 chains, do a V-stitch, skip 2 chains and do a shell, skip 2 chains, do a V-stitch, and then skip 2 chains. I only have 3 left, so that final chain is for my last V-stitch. So then that is our foundation row of the ripple, and you can see that it's already forming a ripple when you look at it, with the shells forming the peaks and then the skipping the 4 chains here creating our valley here at the bottom. Now I'm going to chain 3 and turn it, and then this is where the magic begins. This is where the important thing here is that this V-stitch and the V-stitch on either side of whatever is going on here in the valley, these are always going to get skipped. And then the shell is going to have V-stitches on either side of it with a shell in the middle of it. And that's what creates the ripple as we go along. So I've chained 3 and I've turned, and I'm going to skip this first V-stitch, and I'm going to make a V-stitch in the second one from where I turned. And then I'm going to make a V-stitch in the first space of that shell from the prior row. And then in the center of that shell is I'm going to do another shell. So double crochet, chain, double crochet, chain, double crochet, chain, double crochet. So I have 4 double crochets separated by chains. Then I'm going to do a V-stitch in that last chain space of the shell, and then a V-stitch in the next V-stitch. Then we're going to skip this V-stitch. It gets nothing. So the other part of this blanket is that alternating rows are a little bit different in the valleys. Every other row has a V-stitch in the valley. This row, since we did the V-stitch last time, we're going to chain 2, single crochet in that valley V-stitch, chain 4, and then do another single crochet in that same V-stitch that's in the valley. I'm going to chain 2, then I'm going to pick up again, skipping that V-stitch, and doing a V-stitch in the next one, V-stitch in the first space of that shell, and do a shell in the top of the shell, and then a V-stitch in the last space of the shell. Then I'm going to do a V-stitch in this next V-stitch. And then there's the last V-stitch of this row. We're going to leave it, not do anything with it. And what you'll find, it seems odd to leave that and not do anything with it, but what it's going to actually do is, as you create rows, you're going to find a nice ripple actually on the edge of this afghan as you make it. It's going to be rippled on the edges as well. It's a really pretty effect. Alright, I'm going to do 3 chains and turn. And so skipping that first V-stitch, did a V-stitch in the second one, did a V-stitch in the first chain space of the shell, doing a shell in the top of the shell. Oops. I'm going to do a V-stitch in this last space of the shell, and a V-stitch in the next V-stitch, and then skip a V-stitch, and then we've got this little chain 4 loop that we made last time. We're going to do a V-stitch in it. And notice I didn't make any chains or anything before that V-stitch. It's just connected right directly to the last V-stitch I made. Skip that V-stitch, and then do V-stitch in the V-stitch, V-stitch in the first chain space of the shell, shell in the shell, top of the shell, and a V-stitch in the last chain of the shell. V-stitch in the V-stitch. And then again, skipping the last V-stitch of that row. And this is kind of an example of what that ripple is going to start looking like. You'll have these little semicircles on either side where we've skipped those last V-stitches. So you'll continue doing these 2 rows. Just alternate between those 2 rows over and over and over again until you get the blanket the length you want it to be. And then the very last row, there's only one little difference in the very last row. And the last row you want to do is not the V-stitch in the valley, but with the what normally would have been a chain 4 loop in the valley. And it would be kind of funny looking to have that loop sticking up at the end of the blanket. So the last row is just a little bit different to not have that unfinished looking loop sticking up. you're just basically going to do the single crochets without the chain 4 loop, and it just finishes out a little neater. So I'm doing everything up to that point. I'm going over that peak. Now I'm ready for my valley. So I'm going to chain 2 as I normally would and single crochet, and then instead of doing the chain 4 loop, I'm just going to single crochet again and chain 2 and skip the V-stitch and then do a V-stitch. And the shell. And then the 2 more V-stitches. And that's it. That is how you would finish out the blanket. You can see the ripple on the edge there. And that is what the top of the blanket looks like. It has a very nice curvature for that ripple at the top. So, thank you very much.